Welcome back to part 2 of episode 2, where my conversation with the Reverend Dr. Wendy von Courter continues. Oh my God, what just amazing individual she is. And so here's the other piece of this conversation. I hope that it is as much inspiring for you as it was for me. Dr. Wendy von Courter. And I can't not touch on the topic of this episode, which is the need to be who you are and be celebrated as who you are, and how our faith requires us. And I come from the Christian faith, the Christian tradition, and I grew up in a denomination, not necessarily a religion, because I believe that the Christian religion is it's broad. But I grew up in a denomination that told me that the community that I now identify as a part of was wrong and going to hell, and something's wrong with you mentally, and all these things. If you, in fact, choose to be honest with yourself and walk in your truth, be who you are, and identify as who you believe you genuinely are, and love who you choose to love. And so the big conversation, and it just happened, I think yesterday was signed into law, where we see the governor in Florida has launched an all-out attack on Disney because Disney opposed the Floridian Don't Say Gay bill. And the bill has a real name. It's not, Don't Say Gay is not the name of the bill, but essentially that's what the bill is. The purpose of this Connecting Through Faith is not necessarily to zero in on that conversation, but to paint a bigger picture of the damages of things like that. So I would love if you could talk to our guests or viewers about how your faith requires you as an individual. Why is this personal, if at all it is? Why is this personal to you, and how does your faith as someone who is so rich and seeped into community building requires you to show up against this kind of new day oppression and suppression?
Yeah. Well, it's just, first, let's just say gay.
Gay, 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 gay.
No, and you can also call it the DeSantis is bidding for the presidency bill, right? It's another part. So there are all these levels of it, but the reason it can happen is because, there is hatred and fear in the hearts of so many, and they can so easily be played by this. It's just, and on the other side of it are babies. Did you see that the book Babies Everywhere was just banned in Florida? And Yep. It's just like, are you kidding me? And maybe the producer will flash a little picture of that when this podcast goes live. It's just astonishing to me. But I think it's also very revealing. And for me, seeing that, knowing that we were going to have this conversation, I thought, wow, that kind of says it all in terms of the hurt and the harm, but also the fear, the ridiculous fear. And then there's also a power component of it, right? And so the harm piece is these are babies. What does it mean? Like when you share the bit about your faith, and how you were told it was bad, right? That people like that were bad. And if you didn't want to be one, as you hear that message, it's just like, well, I don't want to be that bad person. And so maybe I can just suppress or cut out this piece of me, which is just, there's such a violence to that. So now we're doing the same thing in these school systems where, what happens when a child says something about their two daddies? It's just that child. We used to just worry about how do we stop bullying in schools. Now we're institutionalizing bullying in schools, and it's coming from somebody who wants to be president. So he can say anything he wants. This is a deadly kind of approach to managing what our children are they think, exposed to. But actually, it's what environment do we want to hold our children in, you know? So we go from this, here's this sacred child I'm handing you, into this school system. What do we want all of our children? And it is all of our children. And all of our children means children that move through the world in non-dominant culture ways, whether that is with their affectional orientation, their gender identification, their not being sure identification, but their family. You know, what does their family look like? It's just, it's so harmful. It's evil. You know, for me, I draw that line there. And like when you're harming the children, it's evil. So there's a couple threads in there, right? There's the harm, but then there's the, what is the fear? Why is this gaining support at all? And if you look at that book, the author, who was number one, thrilled, she said, I don't think I've ever been on a list with Judy Blume, and there were a few others. You know, it was exciting to be, not exciting, I don't want to project that on her, but there was this piece of looking at the other books that were being banned. It's like, okay, I can sort of be proud to be in that group. But the book itself, because she was asked, you know, what do you think it was about the book? And she said, well, this is just a celebration of babies. I think she said it was close to Christmas. She was thinking about the Christ child. She was thinking about, I think it was a grandson at the time. And she just wanted to celebrate babies. And this is 25 years ago. This is not some new book that came out. It's been used and on shelves and in families' lives for a long time. So at any rate, when asked about it, she said, I think that there is one picture in particular that bothers them. And I think it's a man with his hand on another man's shoulder. And she said, you know, if you were a child who had gay parents, you might look at that and think two fathers. If you were a child whose uncle hangs out a lot with your dad, you might think uncle and father. There's nothing in there that is promoting the gay agenda, whatever the gay agenda is imagined to be in the eyes and the ears and the souls of people who are struggling with this. So the fear piece isn't real, it's fabricated in the same way race has been fabricated as a social construct, right? Mm-hmm. And it's very intentional, and I'm sure it's very well funded. We're getting people showing up at school board meetings here. And so that's where I want to take this as well. It's very specifically offensive, and I will return to answer that question about it being personal. But it's part of a larger agenda of how do we keep that angry, not rooted in truth or in values that we share as a people of faith. And a lot of these people are Christian. How do they keep them energized? And what that's turning into is people showing up at local school board meetings and arguing that words like diversity, words like equity, I've been in these school board meetings where those words were deemed as evil and part of the woke agenda and part of the gay agenda as well. And so this isn't just happening in Florida, and that's an important thing for people to realize, and they need to pay attention to what's going on in their own school systems and their own libraries. In terms of it being personal, one image I have, and I think that you're standing right next to me, I think it ended up on the front of the Baltimore News or something, was when we were down there in October, and on my hands, people were writing messages on their hands to be used during this protest and this march and this ultimately an act of civil disobedience to send a message to the Supreme Court. And my message was, my rights are not up for debate. And so it is personal. It's impossible for it not to be personal as a gay woman. You know, that this is not just about the schools in Florida. This is about an attack on my identity. This is an attack on my grandchildren's identity as being grandchildren of a gay woman. You know, it's an attack on us as we move through the world. And it's not a one-off. This is not just one governor who wants to make a big splash, although it is a governor who wants to make a big splash.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really important distinction to make. And so, yay on Disney for doing the wrong thing first, but then correcting themselves and doing the right thing. And even that story, I know we're not going to focus on that story, but even that story, when you sort of dig into it, it's going to hurt the taxpayers of Florida. And yet, and this is where that fear piece comes in. And even though this will be money out of the pockets of many people, should Disney decide to either pick up and move, talking a lot of jobs and a lot of dollars, or should Disney just now lose this status that DeSantis is trying to take away?
Yeah.
Either way, there's going to be monetary loss right out of the pockets of Florida taxpayers. And yet, because of the way fear is being used with this narrative that the far right, the far right is using, there are people that are supporting it, even though it's against their best interest financially. I would argue, and I bet you would argue, it's against their best interest, period. This is not a good thing to be doing. It is destructive, and it's destructive to all of us, but it's destructive to our babies, our children. There I go preaching again, but I'm pretty ticked off about it.
Yeah. I again, you and I could do this for hours on end. There's one thing that I want to kind of just lift up about our time together in DC in October, when the Supreme Court was to make a decision on the definition of woman, which was a very, I think, targeted attack on the LGBTQ plus community. And I showed up. I showed up because, again, the space that you hold in my life and the ways in which you showed up for me, I didn't need an invitation to stand with my friend in that moment. But I remember as we walked out of the church, and you and I always sort of have these powerful images. You know, if you don't mind me sharing, you're like 6'1", somewhere there, white woman.
I'm a sturdy girl.
I'm a 6'2" black man, and you're always in your black robe, and I'm always in my white robe, and we both have our rainbow stoles, and it's a powerful image whenever we're together. And I remember a reporter, maybe not of any major publication or network, but recognized me from some of the very harmful sermons I've preached in the past against the LGBTQ plus community. And he stopped me and started asking me some questions. And I don't know if you remember this. And he was starting to hammer me with questions about why I was there and what changed my mind. And he was really going in. And I remember right like in the nick of time, I felt your hand gently placed in the center of my back, as if to say, I got you and I got this. And together we started doing that interview. And for me, that was a defining moment. That was a defining moment for me. That was, my last episode was when faith meets grace. That was a faith meeting grace moment for me. And so as I listened to you articulate so passionately the whole construct that's under attack, right? It's not just, don't teach this in school, but really destroying the identity of people and generations. As a person of faith, what is your response to that? How does your faith require you to respond to that?
Yeah. Well, first I want to say too that part of the beauty and the power, I think that we've had access to together is a recognition we do have each other. It's like, because we've done it equally as much. When I've needed a piece of courage and felt your hand on my arm or known, It's like, all right, I'm going to go with those police, but Andre's right there. And so there's this piece of we all need one another, right? And as a matter of fact, that song comes to mind, right? We've sung that together. I need you to survive.
I need you to survive.
And so, right. And so that's the power, and that's why it's so important that we form these relationships. I think of Joan Amaral, the Buddhist priestess that we know as well, and Farah and Scott, who aren't ordained clergy, but faith leaders, belief leaders, because they share that same thread of my faith calls me here, my belief systems call me to be in this space. I'm going to lean in and build these relationships with each of you so that because we know we're better together. So, so what I would say is that in terms of faith, and maybe this is one of the reasons it's so distressing that this hateful stuff is happening, is that, my faith, if I'm serious about my faith, I don't have a choice. And I think that if any of us are serious about our faith, or again, our belief systems, I can be a secular humanist and have the same test applied to me. If I'm serious about my beliefs, then I don't have a choice. I have to show up. And what I experienced when you agreed to show up, and I think the Supreme Court was looking at the Civil Rights Bill and deciding whether it included people in the LGBTQ community or not. And so when I turned to you and somebody said, where are you going to be? And I said it, you turned and looked and said, I'll be there. And to me, I know you're a friend. I know you're all these things, but to me, it was you connected to your faith and our interfaith connection that said, this isn't my issue, it's your issue. I will be there. And we can't be at everything, right? But so for me, this is personal, and there was no question that I could go and be there. My rights are not up for debate. I'm going to go down and I'm going to make that statement. But there are other issues and times that we've been called upon to show up. And if we're serious about our faith, we don't have a choice. So for me, as a Unitarian Universalist, it doesn't get any simpler than I believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. What does that call me to do in this situation? What does that call me to do in the interpersonal situation in one moment? What does it call me to do in the larger world situation? And can I show up in that way? And I think that's one of the pieces that as a faith leader, I get even more frustrated by, because I've come to appreciate that facts don't matter. I can talk till I'm blue in the face about immigration numbers, for example, and how much money in taxes actually goes into the system and will never benefit some of our undocumented siblings. So there's all the misinformation out there. We can lay out all the facts over and over and over again. I've come to appreciate that with some people, the facts just don't matter. They won't take them in. But what's more disturbing is that for some people, faith doesn't matter. And that to me is even at least equally harmful, perhaps even more so. Because how can you be a Christian and follow the teachings of Christ? How can you be, Buddhist and believe in the duality of life and the importance of mindful living and truth and accountability? Every one of our faith traditions, every one of our belief systems, like I said, I know secular humanists who are some of the most grounded, moral people that I know. If you're serious about your beliefs, how can you then promote hate? And this bill in Florida right now, like the bills that were in Arizona, like the attacks on voter suppression that are happening in Georgia, all over the country, they are rooted in fear and hate. You cannot believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every human being and then vote to empower the elected the folks in charge of election in Georgia to insist that people cannot hand out water to people waiting for 4 hours in line to vote, once you understand also that that's only happening in the neighborhoods that are predominantly African American. Yeah. So it's all connected to me, and it all comes back to me, to my faith, but also my interfaith belief, kind of, or informed by interfaith, that we all have those systems. It's not something magical about Unitarian Universalism that calls me there. The reason you and I are both there is that you're called there too. You know, Farah's called there too. You know, we have Jewish siblings that are called there too, Buddhist siblings, those who are like Scott, who aren't necessarily connected with the faith system, right? Called there too. That sounded preachy.
You're a preacher. You can't help it. You can't help it. Reverend Dr. Wendy von Courter, my friend, my sister, my beloved, my soulmate.
Putting up a heart on my screen.
It has been, again, we can do this. You and I can do this from morning till night every day, and never get tired of it. Thank you so much for taking the time to connect with us and to connect with our viewers, and to just open us up a little bit, or open yourself up a little bit to us, and invite us into your world and what motivates you, what inspires you, what drives you. I am very sure that people want to know how to connect with you, how to reach you, how to follow you, how to keep up with the work that you're doing. So if you are okay with it, you can share. You have the platform to share your social media platforms and where people can find you and some of the work that you're doing.
Sure. Well, listen, you know, anybody can find me on Facebook. I know that that's an old people's tool at this point, but you can find me on Facebook, Wendy von Courter. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter, although I'm not as active on Twitter as I was during the election when we were down at the TCF Center. But I'm on Twitter, and also I'm involved in some pretty kicking anti-racist, embodied anti-racist trainings here. And so if people are interested in taking that, we're doing them by a Zoom. We're just finishing up our the cohort that I'm leading. There'll be another one in mid-May starting up, and another one in October. And that's yet another way that we can connect across the country and keep building the capacity for a community that's, you know, coming together to do this important work. So email me if you'd like more information about that at revwendyvon@gmail.com. And Andre always knows where to find me.
I do. I actually take planes to go to her when I'm ready.
And thank you for doing the podcast work, and thank you for your listeners for following you. We need all of us in this, and we need each other to survive, and we are surely better together.
Thank you. And with that, I say thank you, Reverend Dr. Wendy. On the next side of this are my connecting thoughts from this wonderful conversation. My friend, I love you. Thank you. And listen, I hope you know that this is not our last conversation on this podcast, because there's just so much that we have to talk about and share. But thank you for sharing with us and for connecting with our guests.
Thank you so much.
Everyone, the Reverend Dr. Wendy von Courter connecting with us today. Thank you. Didn't I tell you that this was just going to be an amazing conversation with just this absolutely amazing individual who knows just how to use her words and pierce us in the right way, challenge us to show up, put up, or show up, or shut up, as they would say. Not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. Again, Reverend Dr. Wendy, I am so grateful. We, the connectors, are so grateful for all that you do and for showing up the way you show up and for challenging us to be who we say we are. At this time, I am going to go into my connecting thoughts. And so, your faith will show you who you are. Over the last hour or so, we had to split this episode in two parts. You've heard myself and Reverend Wendy talk about how we show up for each other, how our faith has intertwined and connected us as human beings. But more than us being friends, a budding, beautiful friendship that we have formed through the work of interfaith ministry, really, it is how we chose to be there for each other in human times. Because you see, faith is the substance of things, or the evidence of things hoped for, and the substance of things not seen. That's my biblical definition of faith. It is the evidence of things hoped for, and is the substance of things not seen. So many times when we are going through our low, dark moments, so many times when we have questions about who we are, where we belong, how we should be, the things that we should say, so many times when we want to hear that voice or feel that palm in the back, in the middle of our back saying, I got you. Faith is that evidence. And it becomes the substance. It becomes the actual personification of the moment. And so more than this, do not say gay bill in Florida, more than this, banning books from school, more than this politicization of human choice to love who they choose to love and to show up in all of their honesty. My connecting thoughts are this. Your faith will, in fact, show you who you are. I do not necessarily agree with every single decision that every human being makes about their lives. I do not necessarily support and affirm every single minute detail or decision that an individual makes. But one thing I do know, for God so loved the world, according to my faith tradition, the Christian tradition, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him, that whosoever is big, that whosoever is broad, that whosoever takes into consideration every person under the sun, every human being, irrespective of how they dress, irrespective of how they speak, irrespective of whether they worship in a church, kneel in a mosque, stand in a synagogue, or sit in a temple, irrespective of how they show up, irrespective of whether or not they choose to love someone of the same gender or someone of an opposite gender, irrespective of whether or not they choose to identify within the gender that was assigned at their birth. Whosoever means all of God's creation. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have bountiful life, everlasting life, eternal life, a life that is full and free of oppression, a life that is full and free, a life that is full of potential, equal opportunities, equal affirmation. And so it is not upon any one of us, and I know that we tend to do this a lot, it is not upon any one of us to use our sacred texts, to use our denominational teachings and practices to diminish others. One of my favorite quotes, I think it originated from Nelson Mandela and was made popular by Marianne Williamson. It says, our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond all measures. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I? To be bold, to be beautiful, to be great, to be awesome. But the better question, who am I not to be? I am a child of God. Whoever, whatever God is, to you, whoever, whatever the representation of God is. As the great Reverend Dr. Wendy von Courter said, the one thing that connects us is that we believe in the innate dignity of all of God's creation. I believe that we were all made in the love, the likeness, and the image of God. I believe that we should all be treated the way that we wish others would treat us. I believe that we should all be given the right to be who we are, show up 100% authentically as who we are called to be. Not be told because I believe something else, or my church teaches something else, or my faith tradition has a different practice, then I'm telling others that who they are isn't real. Who they are should be legislated. Who they are should be banned. Who they are should be diminished. So my friends, my connectors, as we go through this life, as we move through our days, let us be mindful of our implicit biases. Let us be mindful of the rights and the liberties, the innate and God-given right and liberties that we seek to uphold and live in and walk in every single day. Let us be careful that our actions do not threaten those very same rights when others choose to exercise them. Who are you called to be? How does your faith require that you show up? How does your faith require that you support and affirm others, irrespective of what you believe, irrespective of what you agree with in their personal lives and their personal choices? Connecting through faith, connectors, we ask ourselves, who am I to be bold, to be beautiful, to be great? But the better question is, who are you not to be? It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. And I will close with this. Oprah Winfrey said, the only way to reduce darkness into this world is by being a light. Your faith will show you who you are. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your week. Good night.